This move was one of the wildest moves I've ever seen in all of motorsports, not just NASCAR. Well, aside from digital motorsports where the wall ride is an infamously popular move. Not only did this give Ross Chastain an opportunity to win the championship this year, he also set an unofficial lap record. He ended up beating lap times set in qualifying, where cars are set up to go all out for just 2 laps. Qualifying laps tend to be the best of the best because sacrifices can be made in the name of speed at the cost of endurance. That wasn't just this year's best qualifying lap that he beat, that lap beat the all-time best. While some folks think that this is a 1 in a million move, I believe that that is very unlikely. That time advantage is too good of an opportunity to pass up, especially when tires are worn out and the potential advantage over the rest of the field is even higher. So why haven't we seen a move like this before? What kind of rule does NASCAR need to add to make sure this doesn't happen again? And could this end up trickling into other forms of motorsports? Part of why we haven't seen a move like this before is because there wasn't any certainty that it would even work. Most of the time, collisions occur where the car starts out on the inside of the turn, heads towards the wall, and collides with it. This abruptly slows the car down and causes damage that makes continued driving very slow and unstable at best. Ross Chastain's move never put the car at the inside of the track, so while the car was certainly damaged, the energy was not dispersed in a single large impact event, and instead the car was guided around the track by the wall. This wasn't just any wall either. Martinsville Speedway has had the steel and foam energy reduction, or SAFER barriers, since they were initially installed back in late 2004. However, those have been in place for nearly 20 years now, so the final factor that comes into play is the rigidity and safety of the cars themselves. NASCAR stock cars are big, heavy machines compared to most other types of race cars, so with a car able to take a decent hit and heavy enough to carry some momentum, we have been building up to this possibility for a long time. The modern generation of NASCAR stock car can take a pretty hard collision with a wall, and when the wall is softened and driven into at a forgiving angle, we end up with this history-making move. The track designed at Martinsville played a huge role in the success of this move too. You would never see this move at Daytona or Talladega because these cars are already going flat out, and touching the wall at all would slow you down. However, that doesn't mean that it would work at just any short track either. Even Bristol, with its high banks, high speeds for its size, and above average on-track contact would likely only see bad results from any attempted wall ride. What makes Martinsville special? The track is shaped like a paperclip, with long straightaways and sharp turns that get minimal banking. Each straightaway is a drag race followed by heavy braking, slow corner, and careful acceleration out of the corner until the car is stable enough to go full throttle again. Chastain was able to reach the typical top speed, not use the brakes, and take the long way around the corner with absurd speed. He maintained enough speed that he was still going faster than the other cars accelerating out of the corner after he had been turned completely around by steel beams. Had there been more banking on the track, the normal route around the corner would have been faster and the advantage from wall riding would have been reduced. Any other factor that allows the cars to get around the corner faster, like softer tires, would also reduce the competitive advantage of the wall riding technique. Can we see something like this attempted again? If no rules are created to prevent it, I would say we almost certainly will, because it's just too good of an advantage to pass up. There's a reason why it's so commonly used in video games. If the car isn't completely destroyed and is able to get an advantage, it's an incredibly compelling move. Between the time made up, the lack of traffic making passes difficult, and the momentum carried towards the finish line, this is the kind of advantage every race car driver dreams of. I mean, sure, it's a move seen way more often in video games because there's no one in a real vehicle about to experience a high-speed collision, but if you're trying to avoid those at any cost, you don't become a race car driver. This technique is an advantage that only works on the final lap, but that's the most important lap. It's the lap that pays money, points, and makes up your career statistics. There's no way that the rules remain unchanged and someone doesn't attempt this at Martinsville next year. If, say, someone is running towards the rear of the field all day and on their final pit stop takes a chance on just 2 fresh tires, or even staying out, then with the tire wear disadvantage, this becomes even more compelling and compounds their high-risk, high-reward strategy. Even more wild, what if there is a rule change and someone takes the fine or disqualification to pull off this move and bump their teammate forward into the championship or race lead? NASCAR is going to have to do something to keep this from becoming a strategy everyone is considering on the final lap. It's going to get messy otherwise. That's not even getting into the potential safety issue of that safer barrier dealing with multiple drivers attempting that on the final lap. If one of the drivers attempts this and knocks a section loose, a second driver right behind them is about to get jammed up by a dislodged safer barrier. What if there are more than 2 drivers attempting this in that scenario? The pileup is going to be ugly, and the whole point of this trick is to carry a ton of momentum, so it's going to be a nasty impact, and there's no way to steer to avoid the collision. Better hope you've got good brakes after you stepped hard on them almost 1,000 times in the past few hours. Ross Chastain's move is only a fun, positive story because no one ahead of him bumped anyone up the track coming out of turn 4. Had someone spun out there, not only would he have not made it into the championship, there would have been quite the crash that no one ahead of him would have seen coming. Cars bumping each other out of the way coming out of the final turn on the final lap isn't some rare hypothetical either. It happens a lot and is considered good racing by a lot of fans. That started getting into some downer territory, but I'm glad the race went the way that it did, and I don't think there needs to be any sort of penalty for that if there was nothing in the rulebook saying that it wasn't allowed. Whenever a wild strategy comes out of nowhere like this, it creates iconic moments, and NASCAR needs those.
Daryl, what if your pit was before the start-finish line, you pitted on the last lap, and you only had to jump across the line?
Well, he'll have to move. He'll have to move about 50 yards to cross the start-finish line. And that did it. He made his stop.
The 18 and the 5. Whoa, just got in there on the outside. And
Childress cars, let's see if Burton can get back down in front of his teammate. He's done that in the last 2 restarts, gets right down in front of Kevin Harvick.
Whoa, up the outside, here comes Kyle, all the way to the front. He hung back and got a slingshot restart, shades of Richard Petty, and look at this, he goes to the lead.
Even if it didn't, punishing outside of the box thinking is generally a bad thing, and it goes against the core value of motorsports competition. It makes races exciting to watch, and the drama of what are they going to do next keeps fans coming back week after week. The rule that NASCAR can put into place that could possibly avoid various loopholes would be that positions cannot be gained and maintained while making contact with track infrastructure with anything but the tires. Exceptions should be in place for if it is to avoid track dangers like slow cars, crashes, debris, and so on. Care should be taken to avoid being overly restrictive because we saw how that turned out with the no passing below the yellow line rule, where there were good safety intentions at the core, but the lack of wiggle room ended up putting a sour note on what could have been some great race finishes. Whatever rule NASCAR ends up making to prevent carnage from happening at next year's Martinsville race, that's just going to affect NASCAR events. What about other forms of motorsports? Some obvious forms of motorsport you'll never see that in are drag racing and rally events where the sides of the track are lined with trees and, well, fans. Other forms of motorsport that do take place on similar tracks are unlikely to see this happen because the cars are either too fragile or the cost of repairing the car outweighs any potential benefit of on-track position gains. Even Ross Chastain's car is going to cost quite a lot to repair, but putting himself in the running for the championship in NASCAR's top series, that may have paid for itself right away, and if he ends up winning the championship, it will more than likely be the most important move he made all season to make that happen. No matter what happens during the championship race at Phoenix Raceway, this will be a season highlight for sure, and a career highlight for Ross Chastain. It got people talking about NASCAR again, which is good for the sport too. Also, let's appreciate whoever has to replace all that foam in the wall at Martinsville after that move. They deserve a bonus this year. Thanks for watching Cars Simplified.